Big votes and some big decisions dominating this week in Texas politics. Let's get the headlines from our panel, and we'll start with Philip Jankowski with the Dallas Morning News. Philip, what's your headline for the week?
Yeah, Paxton Senate run sets off party battles.
Political analyst Karina Kling, what's your headline for the week?
I'll stick to that same theme. Get ready for a nasty Senate primary between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton.
Brian Smith with St. Edward's University, give me a headline.
Not going to change much. Attorney General Ken Paxton wants to be your next senator.
Well, early Friday morning, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick announced that he doesn't plan on changing jobs. He's running for re-election, but another high-profile Republican is trying to change jobs. Attorney General Ken Paxton, as expected, announcing that he will challenge Senator John Cornyn for the GOP nomination for that chair. Philip, no surprise, this one, as everyone's mentioned, has gotten ugly fast.
Yeah, you said it, man. No shocker there that it quickly turned towards attacks towards each other. Obviously, no love lost between these two. I can remember a tweet. I think we all can remember this one that John Cornyn put out when Ken Paxton was needling him, and Cornyn said essentially, "Hard to run for Senate from prison, Ken." And so now that criminal cases long behind him, as well as the FBI investigation, Paxton immediately has jumped out to the attack, calling Cornyn a rhino, really sort of going after him, saying he's not sufficiently loyal to Trump, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what he's going to continue to do. As you can see, Cornyn trying to do his best to put out the message that he is strongly aligned with Trump.
You know, I was trying to put this in a historical perspective. We haven't seen a bitter primary battle between two-party titans since the Rick Perry, Kay Bailey Hutchison gubernatorial campaign. That one got a little ugly, but the incumbent did win that one despite the polls saying Perry would lose. Brian, how does this new battle compare with that one?
Well, back in the Perry-Hutchinson race, Hutchinson was a better paper candidate than real candidate. She could never articulate why she wanted to be governor, nor did she give Republicans a reason to dump Rick Perry. I think Paxton is going to be a lot different. I think he's going to be constantly on the attack. He's going to be able to run as a political outsider, meaning he's not a DC insider, and that goes a long way in Texas. I think the key to the race, though, is who does Donald Trump support?
You know, Paxton has a very loyal base. Cornyn has the seat during a very critical time up there at Capitol Hill. Karina, that's a really strong bully pulpit for Cornyn. Is it an equalizer or just kind of helps him pull back to even Steven with Paxton?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how Cornyn plays this. I mean, we've seen he's already on the attack. He's clinging closely to Trump. That's only going to continue. I think that it's interesting because, Trump needs him. Cornyn's trying to get, his agenda over the finish line there in the Senate and moving that agenda. He's got the support of national Republicans coming out in support of him early on for Cornyn. And I think that when Trump does endorse, it's not going to be until late in this primary. Even Paxton pointed that out in a recent interview. But whoever gets that Trump endorsement, it's going to be very coveted. It's going to be a real tip of the iceberg in this primary. The other thing I'll point out is if another candidate were to get in, which is very likely, and we've heard from several that are contemplating whether or not they'll get in, primaries are tricky in Texas. And if this goes to a runoff, if there are a lot of candidates in that race, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that shakes out. Because if there are two, if it goes to a runoff, usually the person with the more grassroots campaign, as we saw with Ted Cruz back in 2012, won that very surprising race and won. And so Cornyn's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of name recognition in this state. He is the more establishment candidate, but both of them are going to be in for the fight of their political lives.
The Texas House worked into the early mornings of Friday, plowing through its big budget bill. There was a lot of amendments, more than 400, and a lot of them ended up in a trash can called Article 11. There was talk about defunding the lottery, taking money away from economic development and tourism office and the governor's office. Brian, was there anything in the debate that surprised you?
Not specifically, because Texas is in a good economic position such that we didn't have to cut anything. That's where the surprises would have come from if there were big major cuts to policy. But I think the commitment to fund border security is something that I was surprised survived, because I thought Texas was going to try to move that to the federal level and get reimbursed for the money.
Karina, this is still very much a living document. It's not a done deal, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I will say, as compared to other budgets that I've covered in the past, this was a pretty boring budget night. A lot of long waits on some of those points of orders, and just not a lot of activity on the floor. A lot of people expected this to be over by dinner time, and it clearly was not. So a lot of those lawmakers are happy for a long weekend, I'm sure. But I mean, it largely aligns with the Senate plan, puts billions towards border security, education, property tax cuts, which they're all clamoring for. There was not the test vote on vouchers that we've seen in the past, which really tees up that fight on that bill expected next week in the House. Republicans have, a narrow majority to get that over the finish line. And I mean, as you're saying, this is still a living document, but a lot of that moving forward, I think that we'll see the changes hammered out in conference committee, but it looks like they are aligned on a lot of these measures.
No surprise, Philip, that this thing went into the early morning hours, though. They traditionally do, right?
They traditionally do, yes, and we've had some go in recent years as late as 5 a.m. In the morning. I'm gonna just kind of piggyback on what Karina said, that I do feel a little bit of the excitement was sort of removed from the debate when the one amendment from Austin State Rep Donna Howard, who was seeking to sort of cap the school choice budget at $1 billion to make sure no other funding could be put into that, when she decided to pull that down. Because in previous budgets, we have had amendments that have really sort of given you a real sense of where the chamber stands on school choice. So we were kind of robbed of the biggest political fight. We still got some theater for sure with, I think one of the more interesting, if unrealistic, amendments was to defund the University of Texas, which had some Aggies on social media doing what Aggies do. But yeah, kind of a boring if protracted debate.
But we did have a little political drama before that budget debate began, and a little political nose tweaking. It involved Representative Brian Harrison. He put up a motion to unseat Speaker Burrows, and he only got 2 votes. Philip, certainly an embarrassment for Harrison, but does this solidify the position for Burrows? And he managed a pretty good budget debate.
Yeah, I think it does solidify his position, or at the least shows that everybody's moved on past this. An embarrassment, maybe in the chamber, people think Brian Harrison is an embarrassment, but Brian Harrison pretty much got what he wanted out of all of this, which is essentially he got to put a clip up on his X page saying that, that this speaker is a rhino. It's the most liberal chamber. It's honestly ridiculous stuff. But that's what he's doing, and his whole sort of strategy and things like this is not about being an effective lawmaker. It's about building up social media clout. I don't know what his end game is, but that's what he's playing for. To prepare for this segment, I actually checked on his bills. He's got 68 bills filed, and not a single one has even been given the initial first step to getting a committee hearing. So, as far as being an effective lawmaker goes, he's not one right now, if you just look at the empirical data. As far as being an effective influencer or something like akin to that on X, he's succeeding wildly.
Brian, how do you look at the night and that effort to unseat Burrows? 2 different animals, right?
Yeah, well, I'm going to agree with Philip in this, that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you had really nothing to lose. And it doesn't really solidify Burrows as the greatest speaker ever. He just happens to be the person that they're not willing to dump at this point. And again, when we think about successful legislators It can be, are you getting things done, or are you making your constituents and base happy? And so, uh, Harrison has definitely said, I'm going for the base rather than trying to be a good lawmaker.
What's your take, Karina?
Yeah, we talked earlier about the effectiveness of the grassroots, and if he is, which is very likely, aiming to run for higher office, he's definitely building up that following, as Philip was mentioning, on social media. Brian Harrison keeps saying that he doesn't care. He came here to do what his constituents asked him to do, and while he might not have the backing of the chamber anymore, I think one person voted with him on this. He still thinks he's doing what he needs to be doing for his constituents. We'll see how that plays out in the future. But, many of his colleagues were criticizing him. I'll just note one of the tweets from Representative Jeff Leach said, "If you're leading and no one is following, all you're doing is taking a walk."
Well, it looks like legislation to create a new Texas regulation oversight agency will be the first major bill that's going to be sent to the governor's desk for his signature in this session. Under SB 14, this new government agency would operate out of the governor's office, and that's sparking concern about a power grab, big government. Brian, this is all about trying to copy what Trump's doing with Elon Musk, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Elon envy going on among Republicans right now who are watching Musk and the federal government go after wasteful spending, top Democratic priorities. And here in Texas, they want some of that action. And the optics of having a Texas organization to do that are just too good, even if the results end up being underwhelming.
But Karina, the Republicans have been in control of state government for a very long time. Is this just an indictment against them that they've blown management?
And that's always the argument, right? Of just why are they wanting to expand government, or so it says. And so Democrats can argue against that when what we're looking at. I'll notice, we were talking about Brian Harrison, and speaking of him, he was the only Republican to vote with Democrats against this. And he was saying just what you're mentioning there, that it's a power grab and expands government. So it's going to be interesting, kind of the give and take on this moving forward, and how it plays out into the future. As you said, with the Republicans continuing to be in control in this state and likely to continue that control for a while.
Right, Philip, it's a case of up is down and down is up, right?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I think it's sort of ironic that you get this added into a budget, a huge budget, when if they really were trying to find ways to cut spending, they were in the middle of the debate to do that, and instead they created a whole new entity. So it is what it is. But that being said, that is more power for the governor if it makes it through.
Let's circle back now to Ken Paxton's bid for the Senate. His decision means that he's not going to seek re-election as Attorney General. Republican John Bash is the first Republican to jump in. Karina, this creates an open seat, open opportunity for the Democrats. Who are you hearing on that side?
Yeah, this is going to be a competitive primary in Texas for sure. It could really reset Republican politics here in Texas. You mentioned John Bash. Speaking of Elon Musk, he's a lawyer for Elon Musk, announced he's running. There are also names like State Senator Brian Hughes, who's been a big champion of a lot of the conservative legislation in years past. He rises to the top of those names. Another state senator, Mays Middleton. And the list really just continues to go on of what I'm hearing, and names that could potentially get in there. Eva Guzman, who ran before and lost to Paxton, is also mentioned as potentially running again and doing this again. So I see this being a very crowded field and a very competitive race.
Philip, this is an opportunity for the Democrats, but a big decision. Do they pump money into the Senate campaign, or do they pump money into the Attorney General's race? What do the tea leaves say?
I don't know, to be honest. We haven't seen any. We got to see who's going to run. That's sort of the big thing there. If I would think, at the least, the National Party will be more concerned with a Senate run. If you're asking me to commentate on that, right away. But we haven't really seen, any names floated yet. Democrats have had, 30 years of getting their butt kicked, except for Beto, who came close. But speaking of Beto, it is, they are teeing up what could be a pretty a pretty contested election with a Trump, midterm election coming up. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what names emerge. As far as AG goes, the only Democrat name that I've seen pop up is Dallas Senator Nate Johnson, who is in a position to sort of, has a no risk scenario running because he's, was just reelected. So he can run, he can lose, and he can still retain his Senate seat in the state legislature.
Brian, how about Joe Moody, Raphael Anchia, even Kirk Watson, Austin's mayor? Those are possible Democrats for AG, right?
Everyone's a possible Democrat, but their problem still remains. They run unknown, underfunded candidates. And Colin Allred, their best known Democrat right now, can only run for one office. There's going to be a lot of pressure for the Democrats to put their best top candidates at the top of the ticket. But I think if they really focus on the AG position, this is how they could get their foot in the door. But like Phil had said, they've been getting their butts kicked for 30 years and they continue to underperform. So anybody who decides to make a run has to realize it's an uphill battle. And sometimes it's better not to run and lose. I'm sorry, it's better not to run than to run and lose. And I think a lot of Democrats may sit this out, even though the opportunity's there.
Well, there is a safe seat for Democrats. It's an open seat, and we have a date to fill that open seat, the congressional seat that was once held by the late Sylvester Turner. Governor Abbott this week setting an election for November for that seat after taking a lot of heat for taking so long to pick a date. Abbott claimed the delay was because of the craziness in regards to Harris County running elections, but it also keeps a player out of some big votes on Capitol Hill, right, Philip?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be noted that there were, as that seat came open, there was a very razor thin margin in the in Congress, in the House. And so, you had already seen evidence of that being happen with, Trump administration pulling the appointment of Elise Stefanik to the UN. And so it obviously was beneficial for the GOP in DC if for Abbott to slow play this. That being said, he's got a great excuse for doing that. Harris County has fumbled almost every election that it's run for the past several years, and it's had consequences not only in Harris County but beyond, as the Capitol really has just sort of smacked them down for losing ballots, not having enough ballots, et cetera, et cetera. So it kind of that allowed and gave Abbott sufficient cover to really have this thing, it's going to be at what, 7 months before that election happens.
Yeah, Brian, there's a lot of votes that Democrats will miss out on what could be a key vote, right? So very much tactical.
Yeah, 220 Republicans right now. I think they were hoping to see what the results of the Florida runoffs were or special elections. They both went Republican. So now Abbott's like, okay, there's enough safe votes in DC. We can have our election in Houston. But still, Donald Trump knows he's going to lose seats in the 2026 midterm. If he's going to get his agenda, he needs every single Republican there and as few Democrats as possible. So this is all political.
Is this just a gimme, Katrina, in that Houston district, or do the Republicans try to target that?
Oh, I mean, it's a safe Democratic seat. I don't see this being something that's going to change any of that. But I mean, I think, as both Brian and Philip said, it's a real play by Abbott. He's using it to blame Harris County, but he knows that thin margin in Congress, every vote counts right now. This is a real play by him, and he's able to do it. But I was reading, I think that this is the longest that there will be between, that seat being vacant till it's being filled, the 7 months that Philip mentioned for that district to go without representation.
You can see the full discussion on the Fox 7 YouTube page and also on Fox Local, but let's wrap things up with one word for the week, and we'll start with Karina. What's your word for the week?
Leap.
Brian, what's your word for the week?
Budget.
Philip. Give me your word for the week.
Oh man, I think I said tariffs last week, so this will say tariff-fied.
And that is This Week in Texas Politics.